Hello and welcome to another video. In today's video we're going to be continuing with our 1960 Rideamatic and seeing how close we can get this to completion. Since the last video, we have fitted up the oil bath air filter, which we've cleaned and put new oil in, so that is all set up nicely on there. And we've also done a couple of other things, some of which we did quite a while ago. Now you may remember, when it comes to a fuel tank, we got a new old stock replacement one from America because the fuel tank that was on it was much smaller than the original and had a block of wood under it to actually keep it held still, so we had to replace that. And the new old stock one we got, which was this one here, was just in primer, so we did have to paint it, unfortunately. But the paint did come out all right originally, but we left it for quite a while, and I'm not sure whether you'll be able to see it or not on camera. There you are, you can see it. There's a kind of spider web effect when you get close to it, which we believe is called crazing, which from a quick Google search is when you don't leave the base coat long enough to dry before applying the lacquer, and then it kind of does this crazing effect, which isn't quite as bad as cracking from what I understand, but still not great. Now, that's something to note when we do our full paint restoration. We're going to leave the base coat plenty of time, which we already did with this, but apparently not long enough. Now, we're not going to repaint this because it is pretty much hidden under the bonnet, especially when you're standing at kind of normal height and the tractor's on the ground. You won't be able to see this. That's an important thing that we're glad that we got to the bottom of. And we also painted up these fuel tank straps, which are the originals, but we thought it would look a bit weird having really rusty fuel tank straps on a fully painted up tank, so we did those at the same time. Now, the part that we've been waiting for a couple of weeks is this, which is an adapter to go in the bottom of the fuel tank, and then the other end goes onto a new sediment bowl, which will also be going on there. Now, because this is fully painted up and we don't want to damage it any further, we're probably going to do the fuel tank off camera, so we will fit that up off camera now and come back to you in just a second. Couple of hours later now, and the workshop hasn't particularly been a happy place in that time, and I'll tell you why. Now, obviously, as you look at it now, that looks quite nice with the fuel tank on, but we've done many things in getting to this stage. Now, firstly, we thought that we'd better put this part of the throttle cable on first, because we thought all of the fuel stuff would get in the way, which it would have, so it's a good thing we did that first. But to do that, we had to pivot the engine around, which meant unbolting it, and then there's that massive spring for the Rideamatic that's attached to it, which meant lining up the bolts again was pretty difficult, especially trying to get it in the same place so that the reverse gear lined up perfectly still was a bit of a challenge, so we spent a bit of time doing that, but that is on now. And then we got one of our sediment bowls here and realised we didn't have a union to go in there, so we spent ages trying to find one with the right thread, managed that in the end, then put this onto our fuel tank and started attaching it when we realised there was a bit of a problem, which I'll show you if we go around to the other side, which is that when this is on the bottom of here, I'm not sure if you can see, but that actually gets hit by the Rideamatic rod there, so it didn't fit. So we were pretty concerned by this, trying to work out how a sediment bowl was meant to fit on there when it clearly interferes with this. So we checked the manual for the first time about this part and realised a 1960 doesn't actually have a sediment bowl. We were just too used to putting these onto our 1962s. So we then spent ages trying to find a fuel tap, which we did find one kind of fuel tap, which I had around here a second ago. So there it is, which is pretty much all you can buy in this country now, which is one of these horrible plastic ones, which does a job, but don't look particularly nice, especially if we're trying to keep this looking original. So we said that we would put that to one side, and then went through our second-hand ones and found the one that is currently on the fuel tank, which is an old Bolens one, we think, which we took apart and put all new seals in, which required a bit of fabrication because we didn't have all the correct seals and everything. Put it back together, put it on a spare tank to test that it was definitely kind of sealing properly and wasn't leaking, which that's all good. And then fitted it onto this tank and refitted the tank onto the tractor and put a fuel line on there. So that pretty much brings you up to where we are now. And although that took us quite a lot of time, we haven't actually done very much. But the next thing to do is to get the throttle control lever and mount it to the dash tower and mount the actual cable part in there. We're going to reuse the original bolts for this because we don't have any spares, and since we're going for kind of originality with this tractor, we can't be replacing everything with shiny new stuff. That's those on there. Might be slightly difficult to actually get some of these small fixings on, so might have to take my gloves off in a minute for this, just because it's a bit fiddly. Once again, we've jumped ahead a bit, I'm afraid. We finished up fitting the throttle cable part here, and we also put a cable tie on here as a kind of stopper so that the throttle cable as a whole keeps its shape in this kind of reverse S shape, because when we were fitting it up, we found that that is the shape in which it kind of functioned best. So that's why we did that. While we're on this side, I should also say we've attached the front lift system again, just with the new R-clip on here, and cleaned up this chain and the pulley wheel as well. Obviously that functions best when there's actually weight on the front, but until then we'll let that sit there. Then we've been running the stop cable, as you can see, through these fuel tank brackets around here, put a new crimp on the end and set up the stop button as well, which we did buy a new stop switch kit, which we've used most of when it comes to the fixings and the plastic insulation washers and stuff like that. But we've kept the same button because it's got the same discoloration from the original bright red as the throttle cable, so we thought that looked nicer than having a really bright red stop button and then this faded throttle control lever. So that's pretty much where we are now. The next things that we're planning on doing are putting the grille and the bonnet on, which originally would have been fixed together, but since we've stripped this completely down, they are separate. So obviously the grille mounts with 2 bolts on the bottom there, and then 5 from the bonnet around here, and then obviously the bonnet mounts between the two. However, the issue is that between the two we have some relatively fresh paint that we'd rather not scratch up loads. So I'm afraid this is probably going to be another job where we say we'll do it off camera and come back to you. However, when we come back to you, you will see this tractor looking very near completion. It is now the next day and we have the hood and the grille fitted up now, which was a bit more difficult than we thought it would be because there was a bow or a bend in this side of the hood, which we managed to get out just about. You can see it's much straighter than it was. However, on the underside here, you can still feel a couple of small ripples from where we had to bend that outwards again, which we don't have a metal shrinker, so, and that's what that would need to kind of feel nice and smooth. But for now, that'll do because you can't really see it at all. There's also a bow downwards in the hood here, which we tried to get out, and we kind of reduced how much it dips, but you can still just about see it there. So it's not perfect, but it is what it is for now. And the hood doesn't fit the best with the grille, but it's not ever so bad, so we're going to leave it how it is for now. And when it comes to fixings, usually the Bolens manual is pretty helpful when it comes to finding what size fixings we need. However, for these, the the manual just describes them as screws, no dimensions or anything. So we're going to have to do some cross-referencing and stuff like that to try and work out the exact size of these. But we put in effectively the nearest that we could find, just going off of the old screws that were in there. So that's what we put on for now, and it is all tightened up. Now, in theory, we still need to put the belt guard on. However, we're not going to do that today. Firstly, because we want to see whether everything works or not, and it's best to do that with this all open. And secondly, we're actually missing a part which goes from behind the grill here, is effectively a pair of captive bolts, and then this fixes on like so. Not sure why someone's put a massive spacer there, but I'd imagine that's because they put this huge bolt on here instead of the standard one. But then obviously those captive bolts poke through there, you put 2 nuts on it, and that is that fixed on. So this needs to be cleaned up a little bit more and probably have some oil put on it just to give it a nice finish. And we need to make up that part, but that is something to do in the relatively near future, but not today. Today, we're pulling this off the bench and seeing whether it will start and run. As you can see now, the tractor is on the ground. We've engaged the drive pin, and we've gone around all of the grease points to make sure they're all topped up. So this is ready to start now, which my cameraman here will do in just a second. Now, the plan of action is obviously to start this up, let it warm up for a little while, not too long, and then we'll try to see if it'll drive and tick over initially, because obviously this entire drivetrain hasn't moved a wheel in decades, so we don't want to take it too quick at first. So we'll just see how we go. But over to my cameraman with the pull start. Okay, that might have been a bit too much load for it at first on tick over, so we'll have to start it up again, maybe give it a bit more revs, and then go again. Well, that didn't go too well. We're back in the workshop now, and the tractor returned here not under its own power. It was towed by one of our 1962 Rideamatics. Now, on a positive note, most of the chassis felt quite good. The steering, front axle, nice and tight. The Versamatic seemed to work well. Back axle seemed pretty decent too. So most of the stuff that we've done on this machine has gone well. However, obviously the engine still has quite a few issues. It was running rough for most of the time. When it heated up, it stalled and then wouldn't start again until it cooled down a bit. And I'm sure you will have heard a bit of a huffing noise in some of those videos as well. And that kind of, to us at least, suggests that we might have an electrical issue with it cutting out when it heats up. And the carburettor will need tuning, we think, at least to sort it running rough, which we did a bit of tinkering while it was still running, and that made a bit of a difference, and then it went back to not running very well. And the huffing, we think, might suggest valve guides, but if your valve guides were gone, we would expect it to be smoking as well, and this tractor really didn't smoke when it was running, so we're not too sure what to make of that, to be honest. We'd welcome all feedback when it comes to what you think might be the issues with this engine. And now we're kind of in a tricky spot because we're not fully sure where to go next with this, so we're going to end this video here and do some thinking and do some tinkering in the background to see what we can do to this to make it run nicely. Obviously, this is very much not the end of the project, which we were kind of hoping to head towards by the end of this video, but not everything goes to plan with these old machines. So that is it for this video. Welcome all feedback on what you think we should be doing to solve our engine issues. But that's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.